I'd just like to start by ringing my bell and just letting you to go inside for a moment to connect with a deeper place in yourself. As Markandeya Prabhu was leading that beautiful kirtan, I just had this feeling for a moment, that the Lord is within my heart, right? And then suddenly that thought led to that He's also in the heart of every one of us in this very moment, right? And I just had that, contemplation. Remember in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, there is nothing higher than me, and that everything rests upon me, like what?
Pearls on the thread.
Exactly, like pearls on the thread. So, Paramatma, the Supreme Soul, is like that divine thread, you could say, that runs through every one of us. And one of the perspectives of the false ego, we will look at that a little more today, is to conceive of yourself as separate. We are all connected through that one divine thread that runs through us, that Krishna, that Supreme Brahman, right? Kind of an interesting paradigm shift versus, okay, I'm sitting here in the temple room, and then there is Raghava, there is Markandeya, and so on, right? And you're like, we're all separate, different worlds, different bubbles, versus we're all connected to one divine entity, right? So I would like you to, when you close your mind and you close your eyes for a moment, and you go inside, and just connect with. We cannot see Krishna at this moment. Maybe if you can, you're fortunate. But we can at least recognize his and how we say, acknowledge his presence, based on our faith and based on what the authorities, the scriptures tell us. Just touching that base for a moment. That in this body, as the Upanishad says, there is not just one soul, but two souls. That in of itself is a revolutionary idea. In this body, I am here, the soul. And my eternal guardian, everlasting friend, the origin of everything, is here also. And that divine being, the oldest and yet the youngest, is also present within the heart of every entity in this room. He connects us. And we have approached and come to the temple of Krishna today as a way of strengthening our divine consciousness, our bhakti. And that attempt must be dedicated to Krishna's mercy. It's not just me trying. It's me trying, dedicating my efforts to his sanction. And as we chant the mantra together, with that consciousness that my beloved Lord, who is in my heart, and who's in the heart of all my friends and fellow travelers, we beg for your grace, Krishna, so that we will learn and we will be transformed. This is our prayer. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
It's the consciousness behind what we do that has such tremendous power. So, we are on the path of bhakti, or interested in the path of bhakti, right? And once again, our success has a lot to do with the accuracy of our understanding. So, as I was contemplating what would be interesting to discuss today, I thought to begin just with defining what is bhakti. Okay? Very precisely, what do we mean by bhakti? And from there, we will turn to the Bhagavad Gita for today's meditation. And something which will be very relevant to have with us throughout the week, and most probably throughout our lifetimes. So, you might know that Srila Rupa Goswami, who wrote Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, which is basically the manual of devotional service, and he defined what is bhakti. And in there, he quoted one shloka from Narada Pancharatra. And that verse goes like this. And as you are listening to this discussion and to this meditation, this class, I want you to be an active participant. Okay? There are different ways of listening, as we know. There is ignoring. There is pretending. My mind is somewhere else. There is selective listening. I just pick up what's interesting to me. And there is also kind of attentive listening. I just listen to your words with my head. And there is listening with your heart and your head. Right? That means that when you're listening to this, you're not just listening to it as, oh, okay, that's an interesting topic. But this is about me and you. Right? That's whenever you hear the words of the scriptures, you should tell yourself that this is talking about me and to me. Right? And therefore you're involved. And you should also listen from the perspective that I will share something I learned today, or I'm reminded of today, with somebody else within 24 hours. Okay? Because if you have to share with somebody else what you will learn here, then that kind of helps you to remember better, helps you to be more involved. Okay? That would be an interesting experiment. So, Narada Muni says, Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhaktiruchyate. In the running translation, we will kind of dissect it, but Srila Prabhupada says in the running direction, translation, Bhakti is defined as the engagement of the senses in the service of the proprietor of the senses. This service is to be free from any contamination from identification with the body and the mind, and pure through being exclusively fixed on Krishna. Okay, that's kind of interesting. We will dissect it. So this verse is saying Bhaktir Uchyate. And Uchyate means it is said. So Bhakti is defined. And then, the definition follows. Okay, so what is it? And in just one short term, Bhakti is defined as Rishikesha Sevanam. Anybody knows what Seva means? Service. Yes. And what does Rishikesha mean? You know what that means?
Master of
the master of the senses. When I was studying Sanskrit, my teacher said Rishikesha can also mean he who has beautiful locks of hair. Because Kesha can also mean hair. So that's why Keshava can mean he who killed the Keshi demon, but also he who has beautiful hair. So everybody knows when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was taking sannyas, people were crying and wailing and weeping. Why? They couldn't conceive of the barber, cutting his hair. Transcendental Vaikuntha hair. So, Narada Muni is saying, Bhakti is Rishikesha Seva, to serve Rishikesha. Okay? But then, what's get interesting is that he gives two very important characteristics of this service. First of all, he says this service is supposed to be performed with Rishikena. And this is kind of interesting. We also already heard that Rishika means senses. So Rishikena means by the senses. This is Sanskrit, syntax. So this service is supposed to be performed by the senses, and this qualifying factor is given tat paratvena. And tat that refers to, it's in pronoun, means him, Krishna, and paratva means dedicated. So the senses is supposed to be dedicated unto him. And Srila Prabhupada says paratva means devoted to, dedicated to. It means for the sake of. It means exclusively fixed on. It has its sole purpose as, dedication of the senses. It's kind of interesting. We will come to that later on, but we kind of conceive of our senses. The senses that you're having, that they belong to you, right? But here is this, spiritual perspective that says that all my senses, so-called my senses, are actually Krishna's senses, right? And therefore bhakti is not only that you serve Krishna with your senses and think that these are my senses, partly mine. Everybody knows, every devotee has the temptation of doing the service and then thinking, okay, now it's me time, right? Now I need to do something for me, right? And the whole journey of bhakti is to completely erase that me time, so that there is no more me time. There is only Krishna time. But with the proper understanding, somebody would say, well, when will I take a break? Well, the thing is, when you take a break, that's also Krishna time. That's also as a service. In the Bhagavatam, Krishna says, brushing your teeth, all these regular things can be bhakti when they're dedicated to Krishna, right? But again, it's a question of consciousness. So Narada is saying, bhakti is service of Krishna with the senses dedicated unto him. So it's kind of interesting. It's different from karma yoga. Karma yoga is, this is me, this is mine, and I do something, and then I'm so generous that I give part of the result to God. Right? That's basically what we do. And this is the first step towards transcendence. It's very good. You cannot expect, a child to run, who hasn't learned to stand on his legs. Okay. Right? But bhakti is that you are already surrendered, and then you do service. Not that I do something and then I kind of give it to Krishna. Right? So we want to become more and more clear on what bhakti is about. So this is just reminding us. Okay, everybody got that. Bhakti is Hrishikesha Seva with the senses completely dedicated unto him. Right? And then here comes the segue to the Bhagavad Gita. And then Narada says that this service is supposed to be nirmalam. Anybody knows what nirmal means? What's that? Without what? Nirmala. Without contamination, right? Pure. And I found an interesting English word as in the translation of nirmal. It was immaculate. Anybody heard immaculate before?
Mother, this is a female person from the Christian tradition.
Immaculate?
Mother Immaculata.
Okay, you're saying as a name.
Yeah.
It's also as adjective, English word.
Spotless. Spotless.
Very good, very good. Exactly. And there were actually two other kind of imports of that word, immaculate. Immaculate means spotless, like you would say, an immaculate shirt, a white shirt, completely spotless, free from dirt. Okay. So your bhakti is supposed to be spotless, or spotless. That's service. So that's one, perspective of immaculate nirmala. But then immaculate can also mean that it is not damaged. Now you would say this is a guitar in an immaculate condition. It's completely sound, working properly, right? So undamaged sound condition, it's not impaired, it's flawless. So that service needs to also has that qualification. And finally, immaculate also means like unblemished. It's like you would say this person has an immaculate record, right? So there is no disgrace or dishonor in that. So just remember that word. Immaculate has these three senses. It's spotlessly pure. It's completely sound, working properly, and is completely free from any shame or disgrace or blemish, right? So that service needs to be nirmalam, immaculate, like that. And how? This is the interesting point. Usually when we think of pure service, we think of kind of the externals of it, that I'm offering something to Gornitai, and the floor should be clean, and the offerings should be washed and nice, right? But here Narada Muni goes and says, Nirmala means Sarva Upadi Vinirmuktam. And this is the interesting point. Vinirmuktam is completely free from, Sarva means all, and Upadi is the interesting word here. What is an Upadi? Anybody knows?
Declaration?
What's that?
Like a shape, a form, or an external proposition?
Interesting, you're on the right path. Absolutely.
Desires.
It's designations.
Exactly. Like, if you would say, I am, right? And then you kind of fill in the dots, right? And then you kind of start to tap into the upadis. Right? Prabhupada said upadi means a designation, it means a title, it means, but in this context, because you're supposed to be free from it, it means false understandings. It means material conceptions. It means material identification. Prabhupada said in another place, a dream, a false identity, an illusion. Basically a distorted view of reality. Okay? It's an underlying, all-pervasive false belief that you have about yourself and about reality and about Krishna. It's about some sort of fundamental mistake. Okay? And how many upadis do we have? I asked this question during this seminar we had. How many upadis do we have?
Unlimited.
Unlimited! It's insane. The network of the false ego. It contains so many false designations. Okay, and so that's in of itself is a very interesting idea. That Narada is saying, I'm going to test you now. He's defining bhakti. So summarizing it, what is bhakti? Shout it out.
Engaging the senses in the service of the master of the senses
Yes.
without contamination
Yes.
and designation.
Exactly, and you're very good, awesome, very good student. And just to kind of make it even more distinct, that freedom from contamination means, equal mark, freedom from upadis, all false designations. This is very interesting. If we want to tap into bhakti, because why is bhakti so important? Because if you have bhakti, then you will experience divine revelation. Right? One of the most important meditations I've had this last month is how that spiritual experience can only be received. Right? Have you ever thought about it like that? It's all over the place in the Shastra, like this famous verse where it is said that the holy name is like a chintamani, a jewel, transcendental gem, wish-fulfilling gem. But then it says, how does that verse go? It says that Nama Chintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukta Abhinapa Namu Namanaha Atashi Krishna Namadi Nabhavit Grayam Indriyai. So it says, Atashi Krishna Namadi, Krishna's name, form, qualities, pastimes. It says, not Indriya. Atashi Krishna Namadi, how do I say it? Exactly. Atashi Krishna Namadi. He says it cannot be grasped with your senses. You cannot catch Krishna with your eyes. You cannot catch Krishna with your ears. You cannot catch Krishna with your tongue, right? What to say of your hands. But he says, if you start to cultivate service attitude, beginning with his tongue, then swayam eva spuratyada. Means then he will reveal himself by himself. Spurati means a revelation. For example, those of you who've read the story of Narada in his previous lifetime, you remember? He was a maidservant's son.
Yes.
Right, and then when he was just 5-6 years old, this helpless child, the mother died. Was it snake bite? Yeah. And then, but the thing is that before this happened, Narada Muni had the fortune of spending 4 months with pure devotees, Bhaktivedantas. So he learned so much, he heard so much, and therefore he was, although so young, he was able to kind of not be overwhelmed by this trauma and to take shelter of Krishna. He went to the forest and he found a quiet forest without wild animals, and he refreshed himself and sat under a tree and started meditating the way he learned from the Guru, right? And then what happened? What happened then? Remember?
Krishna came.
Revelation.
There was an immediate revelation. He started meditating in his heart on the Lord, and immediately he saw Krishna in his heart. Right? This is what we mean by spurti. There's I would say, just like we said in the beginning, try to kind of acknowledge God's presence in your heart, right? And then you might actually go further and visualize His presence according to the description of Paramatma in your heart, sitting on the lotus of your heart, right? But it's a whole other thing when He suddenly shows Himself to you. And it's like, you're not doing it, it's coming to you. And then immediately that revelation was covered, and it always touches me so much because it's described that Narada Muni suddenly stepped up and he was completely shocked. He was shocked. Prabhupada says, what we are all searching for lifetime after lifetime, Narada was able to see. Right? And he says, and this is a beautiful description, he says, every part of his body, every sense came alive. In ecstasy, overflowing with ecstasy and joy. And this is so profound because your eyes are supposed to see Shyam Sundar. Right? Your nose is supposed to smell the fragrance of Krishna. Your ears are supposed to hear the voice of Krishna. Every sense that I think is mine, and we're trying to engage it with the world, is supposed to be in contact with Krishna. Right? And this is so beautiful because when Narada Muni had that revelation, it is described that his senses came alive. It was like these senses were sleeping. And it suddenly, and ecstasy was overwhelming him, right? And then suddenly Krishna disappeared and Narada Muni was in complete shock. And then what happened? He tried to do exactly the same thing. The same process he learned. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. This is so important. Prabhupada says you cannot demand the sun to come up when you want to. You have to wait when the sun comes up. And this is where, at least he had the fortune of hearing Krishna's voice. Krishna says, my beloved, I'm so sorry, but in this lifetime, you're not qualified to see me anymore. Why? Because you are not a mature yogi yet. You're not completely free from all material contaminations yet. But he says, I gave you this glimpse to increase your desire, because the more you desire me, the more you will become free from all contaminations. Right? And then Narada Muni followed that, and next lifetime he became Narada Muni. Haribol. That works. So this is the point we should always remember, because the false ego, you remember in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 3rd chapter, Krishna says, Prakriti Kriya Manani Gunai Karmani Sarvasha, that everything that is being done is done by material nature, the 3 gunas. But he says, how does that go? Ahankara vimudatma kartaha miti manyate. He says, a person, vimudha means a real stupid person, a real fool, a really bewildered person who is bewildered, intoxicated by a false ego. He says, kartaham, I did that. Right? I'm doing this. And this is such a deep-rooted illusion. It's one of the upadhis. So it's one of the million upadhis. Is that I am the doer. Right? And it's such a tremendous paradigm shift to understand that I am only an instrument. And the only choice I have is whether I will be an instrument of Maya or instrument of Krishna. Right? I was reading, and Prabhupada said in a purport, he says, all culture of knowledge, austerity, sacrifice, and activities, like attending the Sunday feast, should be aimed at changing the quality of the influence that is acting upon us. So at every moment, something is influencing you, something is triggering you to do something, right? And it's either Maya or Krishna. Either it's internal energy or external energy. Prabhupada says, for the present, we're all being controlled by the external energy of the Lord, right? Every moment somebody is pushing you, this influence, anger, envy, disturbed, suffering, desire, greedy, lazy. We're just being played, right? But in illusion we think, I am lazy, I am lusty, I am envious, I am doing all this. But you're just being worked by Maya, by the gunas, right? And Prabhupada says, and just to change this quality of influence, we must endeavor to cultivate spiritual energy. To change, to shift it so that internal energy starts to work on you. And then it's like you have an impetus for bhakti. That's an interesting place to be in. That instead of your mind working on you, disturbing you, this spiritual energy is working on you, and you're like, now I want to make a garden for Krishna. Now I want to hear about Krishna. Now I want to chant Krishna's name. Now I want to go to the temple. Just imagine what that would be like. I want to share, I want to give from the spiritual perspective. So, we were talking about how the sun cannot come up by your demand because you're not the doer. And the point is that all spiritual experiences are received. And this is the point of Narada's story, that Krishna can be revealed, and Prabhupada says that revelation comes when we surrender sincerely, when we have bhakti. Right? And then Krishna reciprocates. And actually, technically speaking, it's Srimati Radharani who reveals Krishna. This is what Prabhupada says. He says, therefore, the Mahamantra is first addressed to Radha. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And then Prabhupada says, when Srimati Radhika sees that the soul, basically has situated himself, herself, completely at the disposal of Krishna. Remember, Tat Paratvenam, I dedicate myself to you. This is your senses. What do you want me to do? This is this Mahaprabhu praise. It says, Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram. It says, I'm your servant. Literally, Kinkara, Kara means doing, Kim means to ask, means what? So, the what word. A servant is a person who says, what can I do for you? Markandeya. Ragapur, what can I do for you? This is a servant, Kinkara. Right? So, when we are in that position of completely saying, Krishna, I want to serve your will, and what can I do for you? Then Srimati Radharani reveals Krishna. This is how it works. So we're talking about bhakti, and we said that service needs to be pure, and pure means free from designations. Right? And we said there are millions of designations, and one of them we touched upon, that I'm the doer, but what we will finish with is the other one. Another one, very all-pervading.
This is mine.
What's that?
This is mine.
That's another one. Very good. This is mine. Exactly. This is mine.
It's not what you want.
That was not what as a way of a segue, I will ask you two questions. Okay? And I want you to kind of register some of the answers to that question. Okay? And then we will continue. And the question is basically this. I want you to think for a moment, what's wrong with things? And when I say things, means like, what's wrong with how things are happening right now in your life? What's wrong with people in your life? What's wrong with processes you're a part of, teams you're part of? What's wrong with the environment? What's wrong with the world? What's wrong with the environment? What's wrong with things? Okay? So just take a moment and think. Maybe if you think of 1, 2, 3 things is good enough. Okay? So I'm going to tap my... Is it possible to close the door so we don't have the distraction coming? So just go inside for a moment. What's wrong with things? Very good. And this is the second question. A little more, could be a little harder, but try to be honest with yourself. The second question is, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with me? All right. From this spiritual perspective, I guess it got a little too hot in here. I believe you reckon this for me? So we are contrasting two different perspectives. One is a perspective, Krishna conscious perspective, the liberated perspective things as they are. And then we have the illusory perspective. What's wrong with things? People are not quiet in here. Okay, so this is what we want to look at. This is the second upadhi. The spiritual perspective is that everything, just as it is perfect. Wow. It's like everything is just right the way it is. And everything that exists has a fundamental rightness to it. And it's basically just what is needed and what's appropriate, both as applied to ourselves and to others. Right? It's like everything is as it's supposed to be. Everything that has happened in my life is exactly as it was supposed to be. There is no wrong, there's no mistakes. It's like that's the spiritual perspective of the truth. But the upadhi is that, oh man, let me tell you, things are messed up. Right? So we start with ourselves. I got so many faults. Right? Like, this is wrong with me, this is wrong with me, this is wrong with me, this is wrong with me. And then about people, oh my God. About my colleagues, my husband, my wife, my children, right? And then the thing is, we have this resentment, right? The emotional counterpart of this perspective is we're definitely irritated. We're resentful. There is this aggression about how things are, kind of go against reality. You know, ultimately there's some sort of hostility, right? Of course, we're civilized. We don't go around punching people or hurting ourselves. But if we could, we would. Sometimes we just, you know, why are things like that? And we feel things are flawed. I'm flawed. He's flawed. She's flawed. And it's not fundamentally right. It's not as it's supposed to be. Or the favorite one, it's not good enough. Okay, it's good, but it's not good enough. And it's basically imperfect. It's like damaged goods. And we have this sense of intolerance, irritation, reflecting our experience, right? And this is an upadhi. Wow. So you can go to Krishna consciousness and have this upadhi, something is wrong with me, and do your service. The thing is, the spiritual perspective isn't denying problems. Yes, you know, you might see that, you know, for example, I would like to be Krishna conscious more, and I'm not always Krishna conscious. We were talking about the me time. You know, sometimes I go off track, right? So yes, I see it. I'm not where I want to be yet, right? But the spiritual perspective is that everything is all right. Where I am right now is okay. It's a process. It's not like I was supposed to be perfect yesterday, right? But this is the important thing, that what you are is already perfect. I was talking to my friend before, that we can look at our anarthas and our problems, our challenges, right? But you can look at this from two different ways. One, you're in the world of upadhi, that means you're living the bhakti path. And one is that you are seeing the problem, but you don't have this whole emotional reaction to it. That, I see, yes, sometimes I'm, envious of this, my fellow devotee, right? I see that envy. The upadhi version is that you get completely overwhelmed by it, and then it's like, oh my God, here I go again. Why am I so envious? Why can't I be like a better devotee? What's wrong with me? I've been here for so many years. When will it ever, this whole reaction, right? In the meantime, you're not Krishna conscious. This is the clue. The upadhi word takes you away from bhakti, right? Versus, you recognize it, you see it, yes, this anartha is there, but that's not me. That's the good news, right? Questions afterwards. You are not that problem. I'm not my disease. What you are, this very moment, and you were always, and you will always be, is that you're precious, and you're perfect, and you're beautiful, and you're loved, and you're wanted, period. You will never have to deserve Krishna's love. Krishna will never erase you from his list. That will never happen. This is a material experience. Krishna is, and the proof of it is that you're alive. Love sustains life. We say it like that, right? And you're alive, so that means Krishna is sustaining you. That means he loves you. That means he believes in you when you don't believe in yourself, right? This is a spiritual perspective. We need to come back again and again, right? So this is the, perfection of everything. I am perfect. This is the most important thing. And then you are perfect. And the question is, how often, from which perspective I'm looking? Am I looking at you superficially? Or I'm actually seeing your dignity and seeing your, value and preciousness, right? This is the two words we're moving in. And then the other is how things are happening, what's happening in the world, the situations, and what's happening in my life. And I can find faults about it, but it's like whatever is happening is by the will of Krishna, and it's perfect, right? And you need to shift that perspective. And if you do it, you will start to see. I think any devotee, any person basically starts to really consider. You look at some of the challenges in your life that you've passed through, crisis, right? And at least I can look and I can say those were the greatest growth periods of my life. They made me who I am. I went through pain that taught me compassion and patience and humility, right? I remember, I always tell the story how when I attended Bhakti Shastra in Philadelphia, year 2000, and we were reading Bhaktivinoda Thakur's prayers to the Uparishamrita. And Rupa Goswami is saying one who can control his mind, senses, tongue, and so forth, he can be a guru in the world, right? And then Bhaktivinoda Thakur in every song says, my Lord, I failed. I tried to control my senses, I couldn't. I tried to control my mind, I couldn't. And I couldn't figure it out, right? Because I was a new devotee, and I thought I was doing great. I was better than Bhaktivinoda Thakur. and Bhaktivinoda Thakur is supposed to be an acharya, and he's saying I failed, right? But then, down the road, when I started to become more aware of my anarthas, when I had a few numbers of failures, then I start to understand these things take time, these things are hard, right? And then you start to say, my dear Lord, I failed, please help me, right? So, but that was okay. Why? I went through the whole thing. I was like, I'm through with you, Krishna. And I thought everything, and it doesn't. Why are you not coming through and helping me? I started basically blackmailing Krishna. If you don't come through right now, I'm out of here, right? But the thing is, I was fortunate enough. Somewhere inside there was this respect. At least I respect Krishna. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? And no matter what, he is the Lord. I cannot blackmail him. And then I was taking a walk, and I had this profound insight. It's like so I kind of, yes, I acknowledged, Krishna, that you're bigger than me. That's a big thing for a false ego. But how funny is that? It's like if you get a mosquito or an ant, and the ant kind of very reverentially and formally one day recognizes, okay, this guy is bigger than me, right? How ridiculous is that? This ant is acknowledging that this space is bigger than me, right? But here's the funny thing. You are smaller than the ant, and Krishna is bigger than the sky. So, he's bigger than me. I cannot blackmail him. So, and that taught me, that when I do service, I cannot, basically I learned what surrender means. It means like, you come to a point where everything you've done doesn't work. Maybe the way you expected Krishna to come through, he didn't come through because he's not, as Prabhupada says, he's not your servant. Krishna is not your servant, right? He's not the order supplier, right? And the thing is, Krishna is so wise that usually what we're asking for is not really good, and when he doesn't reciprocate, it's because he wants to give you something even better. Always remember that. When you ask Krishna for something and he doesn't give you, it means he wants to give you something better, right? So the point was, everything that has happened to your life, if you look at it, you can see it's a mercy, right? Again, I was reminded by a friend today, Tatena Kampam Susamikshramano. How many know this verse? Yes? Prabhupada says this should be the motto of every devotee. This is a prayer of Lord Brahma, where he says, oh my Lord, Tatenu Kampam Susamikshramano, which means that any person who goes through his life and always eagerly looking for your mercy, expecting for your mercy. And I just want to break down these words because it's so important. He says, Tate anukampam susamikshramana. Anukampa, anyone knows what anukampa means? Mahaprabhu, you know what that means? Anukampa means compassion or mercy. But literally, anukampa means to basically like shiver beside somebody else. It's like somebody you love so much, who might be in so much pain, right? And you might not be able to do anything, or you're just so concerned that you almost start to shiver beside the person. Mother Kishore was telling us yesterday a story about once Srila Prabhupada was very sick. He had this fever, and she loved Prabhupada so much as a disciple, but she couldn't do anything. She couldn't take away that fever, right? So she was like, like that compassion, that feeling for another person, right? So anukampam, and su samikshamana. Iksha means to look. You're looking, right? Some iksha means perfectly looking, very carefully looking, and then su is even more better, so you got two amplifiers of the looking, and then not like once taking a look and then away. Su samikshamana, which means like you're doing it continuously. It's a continuous process. So any person who goes through his lifetime continuously, carefully looking, trying to see your mercy in everything that happens, right? And continue, and he says and he says he takes complete responsibility for all his sufferings, that this is because of my misdeeds, or something I did, and he continues to offer his respects unto you with his body, words, and mind. And then what happens? This person becomes the rightful proprietor, the heir of the kingdom of God. So if you live like that, always trying to see the mercy in what is happening, and continuing to respect and serve Krishna, you naturally inherit the kingdom of God, right? So this is the perspective we need to have. And this is the perspective of perfection. Whatever happens and is happening in your life, or is about to happen that you think is wrong, it's upadi. It's not. There is some perfection in it there, and you just need to see it. Open yourself to seeing it. Krishna's will in what is happening to you. Okay? And the more you can get into that space, then you're entering the world of bhakti, and then you will also have the revelation of Krishna. Right? And then every sense that you have will come alive and be filled with ecstasy. This is what we're here for. And this is meditation we need to have as we're going through the next week and through our whole lifetime. Are we ready for one more minute, huh? Jai.
50 seconds.
Any quick questions? So I would like you to have that meditation with you. What was bhakti? Rishikesha seva, with our senses dedicated unto Him. It needs to be immaculate, spotless, in perfect condition, and unblemished. How? By freedom from upadhis. And we spoke about a few. This is mine. No, nothing is mine. I'm the doer. No, I'm not the doer. And most important, something is wrong with me, or something is wrong with how things are happening. No. There is perfection and grace in everything that is happening, including this moment. You just need to open yourself to finding it. And if you do it, then you will become a rightful inheritor of the kingdom of God. It's a good bargain. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.